Imagine this. You awaken in a vast, dimly lit hall, its walls lined with mirrors that reflect not only your face but dozens of versions of you, each one staring back with slightly different eyes. Whose life is this, anyway? Why does this reflection, this flicker of you, seem to hold secrets you've never admitted, shadows you've never confronted? The stillness presses on you, a weight heavier than any physical burden, to surrender to the notion of fate rather than to own the architects of your desires. There is no escape until you face these images squarely. Every impulsive reaction, every unexplained emotion becomes another thread in a tapestry woven by shadows. You become both puppet and audience, watching a performance you never directed. As you search for a way out, your heart pounds with a question that reverberates through the chamber. What would happen if you brought these hidden currents into the light? What if you examined them, named them, understood them as you might map a labyrinth? Would you find power in ownership, or would the maze collapse into chaos and leave you lost, to call every triumph your own but excuse every misstep as just the way things happen? In this hall of mirrors, you sense the weight of every unspoken fear. The fear of confronting regret, the fear of admitting guilt, the fear of acknowledging desires you've long denied. Each reflection seems to whisper, this is who you are when no one is watching. This is the life you lead when you aren't looking. Somewhere, deep beneath conscious thought, a silent narrator scripts each step you take, each choice you believe you freely make. Somewhere joy, others sorrow. Some exude confidence, others tremble with fear. And yet, what if the pen in your hand is shadowed, controlled by an unseen hand? A question shimmering like a sliver of light at the far end of the hall. What if, by illuminating these hidden forces, you could reclaim the script of your own existence? What if that first step into conscious awareness shattered the mirrors, dissolved the walls, and revealed an entirely new landscape, one you could shape with purpose rather than drift through in blind obedience? What if the narrative voice that whispers, I choose, this is nothing more than an echo of deeper currents you've never explored? The hall around you waits, silent, as though holding its breath for your next move. And in that pregnant moment, you realize that the journey ahead is not one of mere discovery, but of confrontation, a reckoning with the deepest chambers of your psyche. The question you must now face is clear, but you dare not ask it just yet. Instead, you lean forward, ready to speak, ready to dive into the darkness that has guided you all this time. The answer, you sense, will change everything. The realization strikes like a tremor. Perhaps you've been living on autopilot, your most intimate decisions directed by impulses and patterns you can't name, patterns that have grown roots in the dark soil of your unconscious. You step forward, and every footfall echoes as if the floor itself questions your presence. You didn't choose to enter this hall. Why these defenses? Why this elaborate masquerade? You feel vulnerable, as though every step risks revealing who you really are. Yet that revelation terrifies you. What if the truth of your own mind is too alien to bear? Better to stay the course, you tell yourself. Better to keep the mirrors at arm's length, to let the unconscious guide you from the shadows, to attribute the strange turns of your life to chance, luck, or fate. Yet here you are, compelled by forces you can't name, compelled to face images that feel uncannily familiar and yet disturbingly foreign. You pause before one mirror and lean in. The person looking back seems almost like a stranger, yet you know every crease and contour of that face. Here lies the unsettling paradox. You believe you are the author of your own story, that your intentions guide your fate. You walk to another mirror and find yourself dressed in an unfamiliar garment, armor perhaps, or a costume. But isn't that the greatest deception? You try to turn away, to flee the hall, but the exit dissolves into a new corridor of glass. Perhaps the most unsettling thought of all is this. By ignoring the source of these inner movements, by refusing to peer beyond the surface, you grant them dominion over your life. Yet, beneath that terror lies a faint but persistent spark. You breathe deep, feeling the tension coalesce in your chest. You step forward into a corridor of shadows, the echoes of your heartbeat guiding you deeper. In this realm, the air is thick with unspoken history's chambers where your earliest memories lie buried. Corridors forged by childhood whispers and ancestral echoes. You find yourself confronting a hidden problem. The currents that steer you are not random. They have been meticulously etched by forces beyond your conscious eye, psychological drives, philosophical blind spots, societal scripts. You built your identity on a foundation of stories. I am this, Arthur Schopenhauer posited the will as an irrational, ceaseless striving, a blind force driving all living creatures. From infancy, you are grafted into a vast network of narratives. The meritocratic myth that effort alone leads to success, the romantic ideal that love fulfills all, the consumer promise that acquisition brings happiness. These narratives conceal the root currents of your psyche, offering instead neat explanations you can recite without truly grasping. You believe you strive for achievement because you value excellence. Yet is it excellence you seek, or the validation of a father's praise long withheld? In relationships, you find yourself reacting not to the present moment, but to ghosts of the past. The critical voice of a parent, the abandonment of a friend, the shame of a childhood mistake. In your work, you chase promotions and accolades, chasing a phantom of self-worth you never fully claimed. You numb yourself with routines, distractions, substance, ritual, anything to avoid the tremor beneath your feet. And when your life feels hollow, you call it the human condition. You say, "Such is life." You resign yourself to the weight of invisible hands steering your course. But you can already feel another current stirring, a recognition that this is the unacknowledged frontier of your life. The hidden problem, once named and understood, loses its dominion. It reveals itself as nothing more than a map in need of translation. And as you learn that language, you prepare to reclaim the authorship of your own story, to step into corridors not built by others' unconscious wills, but by your own awakened intention. You pursue intimacy because you love connection. Yet is it connection, or the desperate need to silence loneliness that has shadowed you since childhood? You realize that what lies ahead is not merely an exposition of theory, but a confrontation with the very force that has directed your life. You stand on the threshold of reclamation, and the price of admission is awareness itself. Collectively, these unconscious underpinnings form the bedrock of societal ills: prejudice, mass conformity, the exploitation of fear. When entire populations act from unexamined impulses, fear of the other, longing for security, tribal loyalty. The result is history's greatest tragedies. The same shadows that lurk in you animate ideologies and institutions, feeding on ignorance and thriving in darkness. The corridor of mirrors behind you beckons with the promise of answers, but the shadows ahead hold the key to transformation. Confronting the hidden roots of your choices demands a bravery that few muster. It means learning a new language, the language of dreams, of symbols, of bodily sensations as messengers of the unconscious. It means listening to the cryptic logic of your emotions rather than silencing them. It means facing the paradox that the greatest freedom comes from radical self-examination, from turning the spotlight inward to illuminate every dark corner. According to him, your conscious mind is but a flicker atop the tumultuous sea of will. They promise coherence, identity, belonging, yet they do so at the cost of inviting unseen forces to direct your life. You cling to them without realizing that what once protected you now imprisons you. The safety net becomes a snare. You dread the unknown territory that lies beyond the edges of your awareness, so you craft ever more elaborate defense. You are enthralled by narratives that blind you to the mechanics of your own mind. You learn the language of meaning, but you forget to learn the grammar of your unconscious. When you deny the hidden roots of your desires, you enact this very bad faith. You pretend to be free, to chart your own course, but in truth, you are bound by chains woven from the fiber of your unconscious. Each time you claim "I had no choice," you repeat the lie that shields you from the terror of your own depths. You think you decide, but in truth, you follow currents you cannot see. Even in the horror of a concentration camp, he observed that the last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude toward any circumstance. But choosing an attitude presupposes awareness of your inner landscape. If you remain ignorant of the forces that shape your thinking, then what attitude can you truly choose? You'll become a leaf caught in windstorms you cannot feel, buffeted by whims you mistake for fate. Every desire you experience the craving for security, the hunger for recognition, the ache for love springs from this subterranean will. You have dressed it up in rational arguments, convinced yourself that your goals are noble, that your life flows from reason. But beneath each rational thought is a will that knows no reason, a primordial urge that laughs at your carefully constructed plans. I choose that, but those stories gloss over the fractures beneath. Confronting the unconscious means dismantling the narrative you cling to. It means admitting that you did not emerge fully formed, but were shaped by forces you barely noticed. Parental expectations, cultural taboos, the silent weight of social judgment. Each of these pressures imprinted on your psyche, carving grooves that guide your thoughts like water down a channel. These quiet architects of your fate have labored in silence, constructing the machinery that powers your daily existence. Look back to the dawn of your self-awareness, to those formative years when language first became the loom for your inner world. You learned to name some sensations: joy, fear, anger, but the deeper ones slipped away unnamed: shame, envy, longing. Carl Jung called this forgotten realm the personal unconscious, a storehouse of repressed experiences and unclaimed desires. Here, complex images stir fragments of trauma, fragments of hope, yet you've walked past them, unaware of the toll they exact on your choices. Why does a familiar phrase send you spiraling into defensiveness? Why do particular sights or sounds resurrect fear before your mind even registers the threat? These are not random sparks. They are the embers of wounds you never acknowledged. By leaving them in darkness, you invited them to grow into unseen monsters. Your resistance to inspection is understandable. Friedrich Nietzsche warned that profound self-examination comes at a price: the annihilation of comforting illusions. Yet philosophy offers a second lens. Society amplifies this tension. Jean-Paul Sartre described existence as a project of freedom, yet he warned that too much freedom can be that the weight of absolute choice can drive one to flee into bad faith, substituting self-deception for responsibility. Consider Viktor Frankl's insight from the darkest abyss of human experience. Now, imagine how these hidden currents manifest. Yet this hidden problem is not merely personal. The paradox deepens. The very structures you depend on, your beliefs, your culture, your self-image, are suffocating you. This is why the problem persists. The unconscious is inherently seductive. It promises safety in the familiar, in the repetition of patterns that once served survival. Yet, notice the tension pulsing through your awareness right now. You sense that the journey will fracture old certainties and unveil a landscape more vast and more terrifying than anything you've ever known. The air shifts, as if the hall itself inhales, waiting for your next move.
You move beyond the corridor of origins and enter a chamber suffused with shifting light, as if the walls themselves breathe. Here the air carries a hum, low-frequency vibrations that resonate in your bones, stirring something you can't yet name. Each person is enacting a pattern laid by invisible scripts, the clash of egos at work. The anxious hesitation before speaking up, the instinct to conform lest you be ostracized. You have felt these undercurrents, agreeing with ideas before you've thought to question them. Mirroring laughter that isn't yours, shrinking in social settings without knowing why. These are the first signposts of an unconscious architecture, shaping not only your inner world but the collective rhythm of society. You learn that success is measured by external milestones, degrees, promotions, possessions. You swallow the myth that happiness is a destination, not a process. And you swallow it so thoroughly that you mistake cultural narratives for personal truths. When you feel empty after achieving a long-sought goal, you believe you have failed, not recognizing that the hunger driving you was planted by an industry that profits from perpetual longing. You sense that beyond the mirrors and the hidden drives lies a web of consequences too vast to ignore. Your body records every trauma you ignored, every emotion you disowned. It's like a vessel clogged by sediment. You feel weighed down, unable to navigate life's currents with ease. Each symptom, each ache, is a signal from the unconscious demanding your attention. You close off the deeper currents of your soul lest they betray you in a boardroom or in bed. Every day of inattention is a day those hidden patterns gain strength. You feel the walls closing in, the echo of your own heartbeat demanding a response. The unseen consequences have brought you to this crisis point. To change course or be carried farther into the abyss. And just beyond this chamber, there awaits an uncharted territory, the path of rebellion, where illumination meets action. But before you can step into that light, you must acknowledge the full gravity of what has gone unseen. The hum in the air intensifies, inviting you to listen, to feel, and to understand the consequences that call for your awakening. The corridors of this inner hall grow more labyrinthine, the mirrors more deceptive, until you can no longer distinguish reflection from reality. You drift through life, a spectator to your own story, unable to grasp the pen that could rewrite it. When masses of people act on unexamined biases, prejudice becomes entrenched. Polarization intensifies, and empathy atrophies. You rationalize small compromises until they become habits. You justify little acts of dishonesty until integrity erodes. Without conscious scrutiny, you drift toward groupthink, moral disengagement, the diffusion of responsibility. You convince yourself you are upholding virtue, even as you walk in lockstep with behaviors you would condemn in others. Movements built on fear gather momentum: fear of the other, fear of scarcity, fear of insignificance. Political leaders stoke these fires, offering simplistic solutions to complex emotional needs. You vote, you march. You tweet, believing you are making rational choices, yet your actions often mirror the fear-driven impulses of your unlit psyche. You hone an exterior persona, calm, capable, composed while a torrent of unspoken longings churns beneath. You stand on the brink of a breakthrough and hesitate, haunted by the voice that once told you to stay safe at all costs. You whisper to yourself that life is unfair, that people are fickle, that circumstances conspire against you. You believe that true change is impossible, that some people simply have a destiny written in the stars. But what you fail to see is that fate is nothing more than the myth you tell yourself to avoid the disquiet of awakening. By labeling your condition inevitable, you free yourself from responsibility and surrender the possibility of transformation. You propose bold ideas only to pull back at the last moment, because the shadow of past rejection whispers you were wrong. The brilliance you were meant to share remains shuttered in the attic of your mind, locked behind self-doubt you never fully examined. And the more you perform this role, the more the chasm between your public life and your hidden depths widens. You become a split self, the polished operator and the shadow self, ever yearning for acknowledgement. Your neocortex builds roads atop ancient neural highways, habits etched in myelin, so that actions become automatic. Emotion becomes reflex. Your relationships suffer as you unconsciously replay childhood dramas, seeking approval like the neglected child, withdrawing like the wounded teen, lashing out like the betrayed partner. Intimacy becomes a minefield. You crave closeness, yet fear its power to expose your unexamined wounds. You push people away or cling too tightly, convinced you must control love, lest it control you. And every failed relationship confirms your private narrative: that love is unreliable, that you are unworthy, that life is destined to disappoint. Cognitive scientists call this heuristic processing, where your mind leaps to conclusions before your consciousness can catch up. Have you ever felt a flash of anger at a coworker only to later realize it was the voice of a past authority figure? Or sensed a sudden surge of envy when a friend succeeded, not for their sake, but echoing the critic who once scorned your own achievements? These reactions arise from neural circuits formed in childhood, firing off like traps you sprint into without warning. Behind every unconscious impulse is a ripple that extends into your life, your relationships, and even the world beyond these walls. You begin to believe your emotional reactivity is truth itself. The tight knot in your chest becomes proof that your fear of rejection is real. A pang of jealousy becomes evidence that you deserve less. You build your life's map on these distorted impressions, navigating by faulty coordinates. Every decision, what job to take, whom to love, which causes two champion is filtered through a lens scratched by bias and unexamined emotional residue. Now you begin to see the true cost of allowing unseen forces to steer your course. Imagine walking through a crowded street in your mind. The faces around you, expressions of hopes and fears you can barely decipher. Neurologically, your brain is wired to seek patterns and shortcuts. What happens when you never trace these circuits back to their source? The answer is insidious. Cultural conditioning piles atop these neural grooves. Society teaches you to bury certain feelings, anger, grief, desire under layers of politeness or productivity. These cultural scripts dictate that strength is stoicism, that vulnerability is weakness. The personal consequences are profound. In your work and creative pursuits, the unseen consequences morph into paralysis and self-sabotage. Physically, these unseen forces manifest in tension held in your neck. Sleepless nights spent wrestling with nameless anxiety, digestive troubles flaring when life demands change. On a larger scale, these patterns fuel societal dysfunction. Even your moral compass is swayed by forces you never confronted, and all the while, you call it fate. Now sense the urgency pulsing through this realization. The longer you remain blind to these undercurrents, the more entwined you become with the very forces that deplete your vitality.
You step through a narrow archway of flickering torches and enter a vast chamber where the air crackles with possibility. Here, the mirrors have vanished, and the shadows no longer cling to the walls. This is no gentle epiphany. It is a radical act of rebellion against every hidden current that has claimed dominion over your life. You've believed that avoiding conflict ensures safety, that perfection is the only path to acceptance, that success equates to What if each of these truths is nothing more than a worn-out record playing on loop? Rebellion demands you drop the needle. You push open the door of the flame and find yourself in a cathedral of mirrors once more. But these mirrors are different. Each one reflects a version of you that chose differently at a pivotal moments when you conformed out of fear, when you silenced your curiosity, when you accepted a life after. You step forward and place your hand on the glass. The surface shimmers and you hear a voice. Courage without insight is recklessness. Resistance without vision becomes mere obstinacy. Transformation without discipline is chaos. Beyond it lies a city of statues, frozen people perched in polite conversation, stuck in smiles that never reach their eyes. With each step, you leave behind the shards of old narratives. You recall Nietzsche's figure of the Dionysian artist, who dances in the face of chaos and creates meaning through creation itself. You feel that same spirit in your bones, the urge to make art out of your life, to dance on the edge of the abyss, and to declare, I shape my destiny. You taste the sweetness of self-authorship and know that true power is never seized by force alone, but by the fierce reclamation of awareness. This rebellion is not a one-time coup. It is an ongoing uprising of consciousness against the tyranny of the unseen. You feel the echoes of every chapter mirrors shattered, hidden histories exposed, consequences felt, and now rebellion embraced. The path ahead is uncharted, but you walk it with the lion's roar, the clenched fist transformed into an open hand, and the sacred fire burning steadfast. This is the reclamation of your life, an insurrection of consciousness that redefines fate, not as a force imposed upon you, but as a script you author with intention, courage, and unwavering awareness. This is society as you know it, an edifice of expectations that keeps you playing a role you never chose. They walk different paths, carry different burdens, but share the same light in their eyes. Their presence reminds you that this journey, while solitary in its depths, is also communal in its essence. Each person who awakens strengthens the luminous network that contests the darkness within and without. The pulsing light coalesces into a sun rising on a horizon of limitless possibility. You stand tall, knowing that the inner rebellion you have staged is not an event, but a lifelong revolution. Patterns will re-emerge, unconscious whispers will beckon. The test is not to eliminate every inner shadow, but to keep the light of consciousness burning, to recognize old commands the moment they arise, and to choose anew. Here, rebellion takes the form of refusal. You walk among the statues, each one glinting with the dull sheen of compliance. First, a daily journal in which you converse with the hidden voices of your own, mind-naming them, questioning them, listening without judgment. Second, a weekly act of defiance, a small affront to a habituated norm that has held you back, a provocative conversation, an unconventional creative project, an honest confession. Third, a yearly reckoning, a retreat into silence where you review the year's growth, excavate the patterns that resurfaced, and chart the course for deeper liberation. At first, you mimic their poses, but your muscles ache. At the end, so you unclench your own fist, and the ground trembles. Stone cracks, plaster crumbles, and one by one the statues shatter. In their place, living people awaken, drawing breath, and seeing you with gratitude and surprise. Your refusal to conform liberates not only you, but those around you. Let the record skip, scratch, and fall silent, even if the silence feels like a void. You must first illuminate the roots of your patterns, and then uproot them with precision. While fire burns uncontrolled, sacred fire, stoked with intention, forges steel, because in that void, you will find the first glimmer of your own voice, raw, unfiltered, and entirely yours. Inside, a vast arena awaits, empty except for you in its center. The first act of rebellion is to speak the truth you have long denied to yourself and to the world. You sketch in the air a name for the force you will no longer obey. Shame, guilt, the need for perfection. Give it a name, because naming is claiming. When you call it by name, You strip it of its mystique and reduce it to a tangible adversary you can confront. The roar of an unseen crowd fills the air, a cacophony of doubts and anxieties you've internalized. You're not good enough. You don't deserve this. Better to stay safe. You lift your head and meet the roar with your own. You roar back. I claim my life. The sound reverberates, and the crowd falls silent. You realize that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of it. You have been cast as both playwright and actor in a drama authored by your unexamined past. Now, you must seize the pen, tear up the script, and write a new scene in which you play by your own rules. Instead, a great, pulsing light hangs overhead like the beating heart of your own becoming. At first, its glow seems blinding, too intense to face. They represent the spectrum of rebellion available to you: courage, resistance, transformation. To choose one is to choose the path of breaking free from a particular pattern. Which door calls to you most fiercely? Is it the lion's raw, bold action grounded in fearless, or the fist, the refusal to comply with demands that undermine your integrity? Or is it the flame, the alchemical fire that consumes old forms and births new ones? Yet as you breathe, the glare softens, revealing a mosaic of fragments on the floor, shards of all the stories you've told yourself, splintered narratives of what you thought you weren't, what you feared you might be. You realize that breaking free requires shattering the patterns you've long accepted as immutable. Begin by noticing the quiet murmurs that have dictated your every move. You stand before 3 ornate doors, each carved with a symbol: a roaring lion, a clenched fist, and an open flame. Perhaps you realize that true rebellion weaves all 3. The words echo in your mind, and you understand. Breaking free is not about blind defiance. It is about conscious insurrection and uprising rooted in knowing. So you return to the roaring lion's door, heart pounding. Stepping out, you carry the echoes of your roar like armor. Next, you find yourself before the clenched fist's door. Now the 3 doors converge into a single path, a winding staircase that ascends toward the pulsing light overhead. At the summit, you emerge into a vast, dawn-lit plain. Here, you craft 3 rituals to anchor your newfound freedom. As you enact these rituals, you feel the cords of old puppet strings snapping one by one. In the distance, you see others, figures who, like you, have dared to ignite the fire of self. And so you stand at the center of that blazing sunrise, heart alight with purpose. A vast silence spreads across the dawnlit plain as you stand at the summit of your uprising, the ritual fires of your rebellion still glowing in your bones. For a moment, you sense a lull in the pulse of your own heart as if reality itself waits, poised on the edge of revelation. Then the sun, that brilliant orb of awakened purpose, shifts and spills a single ray of light into your chest. In that ray, you see with startling clarity that all the resistance, all the refracted mirrors of your psyche, converge on one timeless truth. The only fate that binds you is the fate you do not acknowledge. You remember Jung's words echoing through the chambers you have traversed, until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The unconscious will never be fully conquered. It is that fertile darkness from which you emerged. It harbors both demons and muses, wounds and wisdom. To exclude it is to mutilate the self. The ultimate truth, then, is paradoxical and poetic. You must embrace the shadow even as you illuminate it. You kneel and peer into its depths. At first you see only your own reflection, wind-tousled hair and eyes bright with recognition. You thank them for their strategies of survival even as you release them from their duty. You are whole in a new waistguard but integrated, fierce yet compassionate. You sense that your awakening resonates outward in concentric ripples. Every person you meet encounters your presence differently now, grounded in awareness, unfettered by unspoken drives. You know that unconscious forces will beckon voices of old, fear will still whisper, temptations to revert to safety will still glimmer. You reach out, running your fingers through the golden blades as though testing the boundary between inner and outer worlds. In that touch, you sense the unity of all things, the internal landscapes you navigated. You smile, not with arrogance, but with the serene assurance of one who has looked into the abyss and returned with a lantern. But you also know that to call these urges fate is to abdicate your sovereignty. Each step affirms, I know the currents, I choose the course. And in that affirmation, you dissolve the final illusion of fate. the story of your life unfolds before you, a story not written by shadows, but co-authored by the luminous partnership of your conscious will and the rich depths of your unconscious. From this day, you claim your role as co-creator of your existence, acknowledging that true destiny emerges from the interplay of conscious choice and the alchemical cauldron of the unconscious. In conversations, you listen not only with ears, but with the attuned radar of consciousness sensing and naming them gently, guiding yourself and others toward authenticity. You commit this moment to memory, the moment you honor the past without surrendering to its claims. When you model the courageous act of inner integration, you invite those around you to peer into their own unconscious. Where will you journey next? Perhaps into the realms of creativity, where your illuminated depths birth works of art that stir the souls of strangers. Perhaps into relationships, forging connections infused with conscious empathy and fearless honesty. Perhaps into acts of service, channeling your integrated being into healing the wounds you once carried alone. Your vigilance in naming a buried need or bias creates a breach in the wall of collective shadow. Your refusal to obey fate inaugurated by ignorance becomes a blueprint for communal alchemy. In this way, your personal revolution reverberates through families, communities, societies and, in time, through the vast tapestry of human history. You let the water absorb your pledge, that you will serve as the conscious steward of your own psyche. Then the image shimmers, and you witness scenes you have carried but never owned. The child who learned to hide tears, the adolescent who vowed never to be vulnerable, the adult who traded authenticity for acceptance. You watch each scene without judgment, letting understanding wash over you. You see how those moments mapped the terrain of your unconscious, how they shaped the currents you once mistook for destiny. You must dance with the darkness as you walk in the light. This is not a pithy phrase to be filed under motivational quotes, it is an ultimatum. You are like that moon shifted between phases of illumination and concealment. Your task is not to eradicate the craters, but to learn their contours, to chart the seas, and to integrate every facet into a coherent whole. That integration is the final crucible, the alchemical union of conscious and unconscious. It is the marriage of spirit and shadow, of reason and instinct, of the persona you present and the soul you guard. You realize that everything you've done so far has been preparation for this moment of meeting the ultimate truth. Consciousness is the crucible of creation. Your choices, your values, your very identity are born here, in the fiery intersection of awareness and intention. Look down at your hands. These hands have torn down statues. They have named the oppressor within. They have roared truths into a silent arena. Yet now they tremble with something stranger than fear. Possibility. Because to truly see the unconscious is to encounter the wellspring of your power and the abyss of your unclaimed responsibility. You have glimpsed how easily you slip back into patterns, how those old currents still swirl at the edges of your vision. But now you understand that each moment is a crossroads, where unconscious habit meets conscious choice, where fate becomes freedom. In this plane of awakening, the world stretches before you like a blank scroll. You sense that every relationship, every endeavor, every silent thought will henceforth bear the imprint of this insight. The lover's touch will echo with conscious compassion rather than unconscious craving. The work you pursue will spring from authentic desire, not from the hollow pursuit of accolades. Even the mundane ritual of making coffee will carry weight, a mindful act rather than an automatic fulfillment of habit. Every breath, every word, every gesture becomes an opportunity to attest to your sovereignty over inner and outer worlds. Yet the deepest revelation lies not in the grandeur of this sunrise, but in the quiet whisper that follows. Consciousness is an ongoing act, not a destination. Recall the metaphor of the moon, reflecting the sun's brilliance, while harboring dark craters and hidden seas. At the edge of the plain, the ground ripples, and you see a pool of water still, mirror-like, inviting. In the water, you whisper your gratitude to the frightened child, to the guarded teen, to the adult you were. Standing again, you feel the sun's warmth suffuse your being. Consider the ripple effect of this final truth. A single illuminated life becomes a lamp in the darkness for others. And still, the plain before you stretches beyond the horizon, a horizon that is not a boundary but an invitation. The ultimate truth you carry is both burden and gift. The burden of unceasing awareness, the gift of authoring a life aligned with your deepest truth. A final breeze stirs the tall grasses around you, carrying the scent of possibility. Now, With the sun fully ascended, you step forward, footfall by intentional footfall, leaving no part of yourself behind.